Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Webley, and welcome to the first episode of the Better Product Show. On this show, we'll talk to you about building better software products. The way we'll do that is we'll interview a ton of experienced folks that are in product management, that are in UX design, UX, UI design, and experienced software engineers. So if you are someone who is looking to get into product or tech, it could be design or engineering. We'll talk to some of the key folks in tech and what their roles are and what they're doing on a daily basis. We'll talk about their careers, how they got into tech, and their careers of how they've gained promotions to become where they are or come to where they are in their careers today. So if you're even in tech and you're looking just to learn from others about how they're getting promotions and how they're extending themselves into becoming more of an influence in their organization, this is a show for you. Even if you're an entrepreneur and you want to build your own products, I build my own products as well. You'll get a lot of nuggets from this because you'll hear from folks that are building products on a daily basis and some of their lessons, and that could be valuable to whatever you're doing. So I'm Jason Webley again. I'm a product manager. I've been building software products for over 10 years. And I work for a large software company. You can check out my LinkedIn. I also have a few software companies myself that I own and run and are generating good revenue. So in today's episode, in our first episode, and this is like a pilot. So if you guys like this, subscribe and we'll keep making videos. In today's episode, we'll talk to Julian Gaviria. Julian Gaviria is, he started out as a designer. He ended up as VP of design and product management in his organization. And so we're going to talk to him about how he got into tech, some of the different roles he had throughout his career, but we're going to focus in on the interview process because Julian happens to be in a position right now where he's looking for a new role. So we'll talk to him about his experience interviewing folks while he was building his organization, as well as the experience he's having now looking for other doing interviews and looking for this new role that he's getting into, right? So a bunch of nuggets. I'll try to pull out as many and double click on anything that is valuable that you guys may want to make notes of. So stay tuned and we'll jump into the video now. If you do find this valuable, again, subscribe to the channel so we'll keep making videos. Yeah, man. Julian, what's going on? How are you?
Oh man, I'm a little tired. It's end of day. Like my brain shuts off after about like 4 o'clock. I don't know how you do it, man. You so you work full time for MasterCard, but you also have your like own company full time on the side, it seems, right? Or
Yeah, I have like 3 companies, man.
that's crazy, man. How do you find time? How do you do that? That's like that. That shirt's very fitting. It's yeah.
It's my Superman shirt. I love the shirt. Yeah, but I try to balance though. I try to like in between full-time W2 work and all the other stuff that I do.
Yeah.
I try to fit in as much of me time as possible.
Yeah.
So that kind of balances it out.
Do you have any kids or no?
No kids yet. So that gives a lot more time as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't have kids either. And I'm trying to picture what life looks like after kids, and it's gonna be crazy. Hats off to anybody in the tech industry and in the product industry that that does have an entire family to take care of. It's I mean that in and of itself deserves its own like standalone podcast and set of interviews.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You can only imagine what that's like. It's really tough. So yeah, man. So let's jump in. This is great. It's the first ever episode that we recorded,
Uh,
um, and on the Better Product Show,
I like,
right?
yeah.
You like that name?
Dig
Yeah,
it. Right.
yeah. They're up in the woods. What's that like?
Yeah. So it's interesting when COVID hit, my fiance and I were at the time working out of our like 600 square foot Jersey City apartment. And
I have no idea how big that is, by the way. Like,
it's small, man. It's like it's enough square footage that you could upgrade from being a studio apartment to a regular apartment, but it's small. She was like, "Hey, we should get a lake house," because at the time we're watching Ozarks, and
yes.
I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." So she got into Zillow, started pinching her way towards the Poconos and up north towards upstate New York, the Catskills, and she found this place, and yeah, we've been here ever since. And now all tech workers are working remotely for the most part, at least. So if it fits perfectly in our lifestyle.
Working in the tech industry, that's one advantage right now, especially after COVID, is that we work from anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty great.
Do you miss the office at all?
Not at all. Not at all.
No. It takes a lot of discipline. It does to work, not necessarily remotely, but it takes a lot of discipline to work from home, because there are so many distractions, and you have pets, and you have the refrigerator, and like everything's like at an arm's like reach. So it's yeah, I miss the office a bit because of that part. But actually, what I've been doing recently, and I know we're not supposed to get into too deep into this part, but I'll end it here. What I've been doing recently is I just got up in the morning and I head over to a coffee shop. I work the entire morning at the coffee shop, and then I head home and work the rest of the afternoon at home. And that has been extremely helpful in helping me structure my day. And yeah, but it's but yeah, I don't mind it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. That's pretty. I gotta figure out getting out of this room more often. This is like where I spend most of my day.
Yeah.
Right in this spot. Sometimes I try to go to the living room, then I'll work from the couch, or like the table, dining table. But this is where I spend most of my time.
That's just straight up like a room that you have dedicated to like office work in your house?
Yeah. This is my office.
Oh.
It's messy, so I won't show you, but you could see I've got a little bit of natural light from there over there.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's good. I'm gonna be in a new office. I'm moving in a few weeks. Actually, when am I moving? At the end of August, I'm moving.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what your setup is going to be, how you're actually designing it, all that fun stuff. I think the design, at least like my interest in design, goes way beyond just the digital stuff. And I could show you some things later on too that we've like remodeled around the house. But it's it's cool stuff.
All right, so Julian, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, your background, so folks know who we're talking to.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. So I've most recently, I was most recently heading up both product and design for a platform called thomasnet.com. Thomas, actually, it's the largest industrial sourcing platform in North America. This is where industrial buyers go and find industrial suppliers. So for example, if SpaceX or the Boring Company is looking for a specific product or material for any of the either rockets or research that they're doing, they come onto Thomasnet, they find an industrial manufacturer, industrial supplier, that could either provide the material or manufacture the part for them. So it's a platform. It's actually a company that's been around since 1898. So it's been, yeah. It was pretty successful in the whole digital transformation. So I joined the product team back in 2017, and at the time the entire organization was going through a rebrand. My first initiative or task was to redesign the entire platform according to our new brand. So we got the redesign up and running. It took us about four months. By January of 2018, we had a brand new responsive platform, which at the time it was not. And yeah, I mean, I've been leading design ever since. Once 2020 came, and we could probably leave this story for later on.
Yeah, no worries, because there's a few things you said I wanted to double click on. So you said the company that Thomas
yeah, they're called Thomas, well, they're technically called thomasnet.com. Yeah,
ThomasNet. They've been around since the 1800s.
1898. Yeah, it's crazy.
1898. That's crazy, dude. What are they still doing the same thing that they were doing back in 1898?
They are, believe it or not, which is crazy. Wow. Fun fact: we're about two years younger than the city of Miami, which it's something that I looked up not too long ago, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. Yeah. So what the company started off doing, they would publish these big green books, and I wonder if I have anything here to. They were a registry of registry of American manufacturers, right? And this is a replica of the first I guess catalog that they came up with. And they gathered all the information of all industrial manufacturers in the United States at the time, and then they would go around selling these books to buyers. So it's a really well-known brand. We were still in the same office that they originally founded the company back in 1898, which yeah, it's right in the middle of Midtown. It's 34th and 8th Avenue, which is, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Isn't that where Penn Station is?
Penn Station, Madison Square Garden. Facebook,
like right across the street from there.
Yeah, right across the street from there. Cool. Yeah, it's and yeah, the company's still there.
Wow. That's impressive, man. Yeah, very impressive history on the company. The company still is there. And so how do you, like, in terms of your background, what's something that you like to share with the audience today that would be beneficial to folks, looking to get into tech?
So it's interesting because that's a good segue to that last part of the introduction. So by the end of 2020, I got promoted from heading up design to heading up both product and design at a VP level, and we ended up getting acquired a year later, and we got acquired by a company called Xometry, publicly owned, and the acquisition took place in December of 2021. I played more of an individual contributor role after the acquisition, and in June last month, I decided to part ways with the company. I left on a good note voluntarily, and right now what I'm doing is trying to figure out what my next step is, and a big part of that is in figuring out how to tell my story and how to get a job at a director or VP level as a designer with an engineering and product background. So it's been an interesting ride, and I feel like my story would be beneficial
Yeah.
for folks that are looking for a job, right?
Yeah.
Also,
Right.
I've done a decent amount of hiring too throughout my career.
Yeah.
Uh,
So you definitely know both sides of the coin. You
yeah,
know, you're going through that process right now of looking for your next opportunity, but at the same time, you've also hired a bunch of people in the past, right? Because I think you said you were a VP of product in your last role. So, that's interesting. So I wanted to double click on that for folks, just to, who's trying to transition into tech, obviously, and or might be in the beginning part of their career in tech, and they're trying to figure out the whole thing, right? So, like, from your perspective, what's the difference between product managers and what they do, designers and what they do, and then engineers? Like, where's the line? Like, or if there's any lines at all, like, what's your perspective?
yeah. I think as the industry progresses, we do get more specialized in each vertical, but at the same time, the line gets blurrier and blurrier. So the best software engineers that I've worked with in my career have a really good background in design and really understand product strategy and are very focused in the impact of what they're building. Designers, the best designers that I've worked with in my career have a very strong knowledge of software engineering, and they love strategy. Everything that they do is in line with product strategy, and at times I would even see designers playing that product management role. And product managers, that's the center of it all, right? Any product manager that understands engineering, understands design, understands business, that's really the three different pillars for product management. So it's the lines, roles become more defined, but the lines become blurrier and blurrier as we go. It's interesting.
Yeah. And I'll jump backwards a bit. How did you get into tech? I don't think we talk a lot about that, but that'll be interesting to hear that story. We could come back to the whole interview and stuff. But how did you get exposed to tech and end up getting into tech initially?
So it's a bit of it's an interesting background. I started building websites when I was about 13 years old. I don't want that to deter anybody that's listening, though, because you don't need to have gotten into design and code that early on. I just happened to have gotten into it. My mom bought me my first computer, and I was like, hey, how do I build all this stuff that people are talking about? Did that starting 13. I think ended up going to college on a soccer scholarship, and I already knew the development side of building things for the web. So I was like, hey, why not take advantage of this opportunity and really learn the graphic design side? I don't know why I didn't go deeper into the software engineering side, because I could have easily gone into computer science. But I decided to go into graphic design instead. And honestly, that's been one of the best decisions that I've made in my life. The combination of development and design, it's a bit of a powerhouse of skills for you to have. So ended up getting my first job out of out of college.
How did that happen? How did you end up getting did you like go to like any type of trade shows? Not, I guess they're not called trade shows. They're called, what do they call these events in college for
Yeah,
college?
like career day, career. Yeah, I forget the name.
Yeah. Did you do any of that stuff, or how did you end up?
So I didn't. I actually, that's a good question. When I was in college, one of my professors recommended that I apply for an internship with, at the time they were called he was called the webmaster. The position was called the webmaster.
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, it's so he introduced me to the webmaster, and and I joined the team as the junior webmaster, believe it or not. And by the end, I worked with him for about 2 years, and we were managing. It was just two of us, and we were managing the entire online presence of our college, right? Which is Bloomfield.edu. So we did that for 2 years. By the time I graduated, he had already left. He left a few months before, and he left to go work at this company called ThomasNet. And by the time I graduated, he recommended he recommended me for a junior or entry level web designer position. And yeah, I went, I interviewed, they were happy with my portfolio, and I got a job offer, I think it was like a month before I graduated. So by the time I graduated, I think I started either the next Monday or a week later, one of those two. But yeah, it's and that's actually it's interesting because what I've come to realize now, looking for a job at this stage, is that the entire like the recruiting industry, job like applicant industry, I don't even know if there's a name for it, but it all depends on who you actually know, and who recommends you. There's obviously a decent amount that you have to do on your end, but it's about it's about your network. So yeah.
Absolutely. You couldn't say that any better. I mean, we all hear people say it, right? Your network is your net worth.
Oh yeah.
And but we don't really think about what it really means. But it's so true because a referral is way stronger than just someone from LinkedIn trying to apply for a role, right? It's supposed to, when someone inside the company who's well respected says, "Oh yeah, I know that guy or that girl is very, very good," or say some good words about someone, that goes a long way.
Especially because that the company is betting on the person that they're going to hire. It at the end of the day, it ends up being a level of I guess liability if you hire the wrong person. So knowing that you already have an internal person that recommended this individual, that at least gets you 1 foot in the door,
right,
to be able to interview with the recruiter or even the hiring manager as well.
That's correct.
So yeah, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, cool. So, back to your story. Where'd you go after that? So you got the job, you came in as a junior individual on the team, and tell us about your first experience being in an actual, like, your first job as I guess you were a UX or graphic designer, one of the two, or
it was still pretty general. It was a web designer.
Okay.
So it was still a pretty general role.
Oh, okay. Tell us about that. Like, what were some of the things that that helped you in that role that you learned from the past? And what was some of the expectations that was set forth for you, like initially as a junior person coming in to a team?
Yeah, it was. So I guess like one of the things that helped me out a ton is that I do love design, and I have loved design, and I've appreciated design my entire life. So there's a passion for that already on my end. I wasn't necessarily doing this for for the money. I was doing this because, yeah, I mean, I wanted to design some cool stuff, and I wanted to build stuff.
Yeah.
So the first, I guess the first time I was actually doing something professionally, or at least that I realized that I was doing something professionally, is when I hopped on my first design call, because the team that I had joined, they built these small websites. They designed and built these small websites for industrial manufacturers, and what we would do as web designers is that we would talk to these clients and understand what they wanted for their website redesign, right? What their tastes were, what was their color scheme. Branding wasn't too big in the industrial manufacturing industry. So a lot of the branding for these organizations were simply based off of, what color scheme we decided to use.
Mm-hmm.
So it's yeah, the expectations were just well, I think this is, yeah, we were designing websites in 3 days, which is crazy. We would have a design call on Monday, and by Wednesday or Thursday of that same week, we needed a fully redesigned homepage and secondary page to be able to present, and yeah, and sell the client on why this was the design that they needed to move forward with. We got a decent amount of client facing time, and I think at that time in my career was perfect for what I needed.
Mm. Okay. And so how was the dynamics to the team like coming in? So you had this project, and how did the team work together? Like, what was some of the skill sets that you needed to learn or adapt, or what kind of help you integrate with the team, and the expectations around just working within that dynamic?
So I think we were a team of around 6 designers, I think. But what was interesting is that we never actually worked together on a project. Every single website that we were building, it was with a project manager. It was in collaboration with a project manager. And I think that was it at the time. So it was between the project manager and the designer, that everything would come together. I think the biggest no, yeah. Wait, was there a second part to the question? I forgot.
And I think you said you kind of just always worked with a project manager, so you never really worked with the other designers. So
Yeah.
you were kind of independently working, and you just have a one contact with the project manager.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because these were old school designers. They a few of them actually came from the print days of the organization too, and it was a very blue collar work culture, where I was able to get a website up and running, or a web design up and running in about a day and a half. At times, that's all I needed. And I still remember some of my colleagues saying, "Hey, we know that you could do it super quick. So could all of us. Just take your 3 days." And I was like, okay, yeah, okay, I'll take my 3 days. That's when I started getting a better understanding of just like real world, like work dynamics, right? What motivated some people, what didn't motivate some people, and yeah, it was a good experience. Yeah,
That's pretty cool. Because you start to see, like, you're coming in and you're super young and you're passionate about what you're doing, and then there's this people like, oh no, take as much time as you could get, because
yeah.
right, like, I had a similar experience where, just like you, like when I got into tech, I got in because I got in by accident, actually, because I was an athlete too. I played soccer, and just like you, and And I got in because I started a company that I was pretty passionate about. But when I got my first job, my actual first job, I was still pretty, I figured out that I found the thing that I wanted to keep doing for like the rest of my life, right? Um, and when I got my first actual job, and not being in my startup environment, which I ran that startup for like 5 years, by the way, but like not being in that startup environment anymore, and now being in like an actual job where you had people that were just legit just doing this because they have bills to pay, right? So they didn't really have that same level of passion. And it was just different. It was just different being around folks like that, right?
Yeah.
So I totally get what you're saying.
And isn't it crazy too? Because like you played soccer, and the reason that most soccer players play soccer is because we have a big interest in the sport. We have a passion for this stuff, right? Like I remember in college getting up at like 7 o'clock in the morning on Sundays to go play bush league, which is, for I guess listeners, is just independent Sunday leagues, where yeah, I mean, it's people from like all over the place that come and compete. Nobody
Yeah.
was forcing us to do this. We just, yeah, it's stuff that we love. And then we go into the real world and we have this mentality of like, the world runs because everybody's passionate about what they do. And wow, did we get slapped in the face with reality?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, at least it happened to me, and it's yeah. But it was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. I remember like my first manager. And I don't know if that person would watch this at some point, but I just remember my first manager. Um, he was pretty like, I mean, he knew his stuff to an extent, but coming from a startup where you make decisions like really quickly because there isn't any chain in command, and there isn't any political influences, right? So you're used to making very quick decisions and then testing it. If you fail, then you just, all right, you try again and you try a different thing this time, right? um but I just remember my manager taking like a month to make a decision that I made in like, I don't know, a couple minutes,
Yeah.
right? And it was quite frustrating to see that because it was just, we were just literally just sitting there having the same conversation over and over and over, and no action was being taken. Just same conversation, different meetings, different people, right? Same topic. It's just like, isn't it clear already that we should have done X last week, right? Like, and then finally after a month we did X, and
Yeah.
then we get another topic, another thing, and the whole thing starts over again. It was very frustrating, dude.
Why do you think there was a hesitation on your manager's side?
I think it's it, and this is where I think for folks coming into organizations, especially if you're starting out, you have to be aware of the type of organization that you're coming into. A lot of it could be because it's cultural. A lot of it could be based on what type of company that person is used to working in, or environment that person is used to working in, right? And in some cases, it could be legit. The person doesn't know what the right answer is, so they're trying to get as much information from other people as possible to try to make a decision that they don't want to be wrong. They're scared of being wrong because they're from organizations where you did something wrong and maybe you don't get that promotion, right? Or so I think things like that, it could be multiple reasons, but mostly the ones that I just mentioned, I believe, was a reason. But it was very frustrating.
Yeah.
in that team and in that situation. So
And I guess it depends a lot too on the type of industry. Because I know, so you're at MasterCard right now. And um I I want to say that MasterCard is probably very risk averse. It's a financial institution, right? If they do make a mistake, it's going to cost. There could be situations where that mistake could cost the organization millions. So I could understand some managers being in situations where they need to be, because of the nature of the organization and the industry. They need to be risk averse. It's usually not the case everywhere else. Obviously, you want hospitals and other institutions similar to those.
yeah,
Extremely risk.
absolutely. And you're right, and that's why it depends on the company, the culture, but it also depends on the individual as well.
Yeah.
This manager wasn't a MasterCard manager. This was my previous company that I was working for. It was a much smaller company than MasterCard. They were, at the time when I joined, I think they were maybe in the 300 range in terms of employees.
Okay.
Right, 300 or 400, which isn't that big. I mean, they're big, but it's not that big.
Yeah.
Right? Like it was still small enough where I was working in the HQ, and this was Hamilton, New Jersey. I was working in the HQ, and you'll get to know everyone by face,
Yeah.
right? Who works there. So it's,
Yeah. It's interesting. The in situations like that, it's usually because the manager is completely insecure, and they were brought up in a culture where, yeah, they get lit up, for, I guess, lack of a better term, for making mistakes, and then they treat everybody that reports them in the same way, and that creates such a just like negative chain of like habits.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah. So not great, not a great manager to have initially, but that worked out in a best way that I would say could possibly have worked out for me personally. So yeah.
Do you manage people today?
Right now, not in my W-2 role, but in my personal, in my companies. Yeah, I do, and I've been doing that for a long time. Yeah, but I am in a management role at MasterCard, but the way our team is set up, I don't have any direct reports right now.
Yeah. How do you usually manage a culture of taking risks, right? Like, how do you, it's easier said than done, right? It's okay to make mistakes, sure. But how do you actually instill a culture of, failing fast, or failing, not failing, that sounds horrible, failing fast and often.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to the culture of the company ultimately. I think from my startup point of view, it's just the only way to actually grow your business, because if you're not failing fast, you're gonna fail at some point. So that just means that you're not failing fast. You're taking a really long time to fail. And what happens in a really long time? You spend more money, spend more time. You could get drained, you could get overwhelmed. There's a lot of things that could happen that change in your personal life. Circumstances change, right? So there's a lot of things that could happen over time that, it's just different. And you got to be able to move quickly before those things start to shift, right? You've got to be the change maker in your business, or in the startup, or the environment that you're in, so that you kind of, I don't want to say dictate, but it's kind of is that you're forcing the outcome to happen that you want to happen, right? But in the end, it works out better for you, your business, your team, and others. So so my whole thing is you fail fast, right? You learn from the failures that you've had. You take that, you implement changes in your next iteration, right? So it's like taking an iterative approach.
Yep.
So I'm really big on that. And
Yep.
even I try to implement that in the bigger companies that I work in. So even at MasterCard, I've got my own way of doing my product management, whereas others have different ways.
Yep.
Right? And my whole way is I'll do something, I'll test, I'll do a lot of tests, right? So I'll run, I could run tests in many different ways. The most expensive test is to have like engineering, design, go and build something, right? That's the most expensive test.
Yeah.
I try to stay away from that as much as possible.
At that point, it's a feature, right?
Pardon me?
At that point, it's a feature. Yeah.
You're right. The funny thing, and it's kind of unfortunate, but one of the things that I see product managers doing a lot is that they run tests with features. And while you can do that, it is, like I said, the most expensive way to do a test, because if you're wrong, you've just wasted an entire year or a couple months or whatever time it took for that feature to go, get developed, all the stuff that we go through in the development life cycle, right? And then go out to market where you're not going to get like everything you need in terms of data on day one, right? When you launch a product. Yeah. So it's going to take time for you to even get that learning. And before you know it, it's like half a year to a year.
Yeah.
And this is something that you probably could have found out like 12 months earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if so if you're building and yeah, like I've witnessed this as well in my career, where there are features that are being built under the disguise of experiments, right? And then the organization has spent so much time and resources already on putting this feature together that when you go and test it, there's a layer of bias that comes with how you want this feature to or these test results to end up. Mm-hmm. So you really like go through the entire set of data and you're looking for specific stories that the data is going to tell that's going to support that hypothesis, not even hypothesis, the decision that you've already made of going live with that feature. So yeah, it's definitely not the way to go about it. And it's an interesting topic and one that I have a decent amount of interest in, because I actually, I started what we call an experience optimization program at ThomasNet, where on a bi-weekly basis, we would prioritize test ideas and then run these A/B tests on the platform. Now we get around 1.7 million active users a month. So we have a decent amount of traffic to actually test with. Over the course of 4 years, and we get into the detail later on, but over the course of 4 years, we ran close to 300 experiments, and we doubled the platform's like primary KPIs. And this was all design-led as well, which is super interesting because it's usually not an approach that organizations take. It's either usually led by product managers or data analysts or data scientists, et cetera. But this was a design-led experimentation program, which is super cool. And when we have more time, I could definitely go deeper into the details there. But
that's great. That's awesome. On that note, I wanted to go back and you actually that's a perfect segue actually on the next topic that I had. Why don't you tell us about a project that you worked on? Kind of jumping forward now in your career. I mean, it could have been in the beginning too, wherever it was, right? But tell us about a project that you did, and what was unique about this product? What problem were you solving? Did you achieve product market fit. You could choose anything from, your experience.
Yeah. So
That's the one that you started talking about. It's totally.
Yeah. So it's I'm going to choose one that we call the COVID-19 response system. And when COVID hit, in the beginning of COVID, I believe it was like mid-March, my fiance, which also works at the company, we're both working out of the apartment, and she works on the client-facing side. So she deals with the agency side for industrial manufacturers, right? So creating websites, creating marketing programs to be able to generate more leads and more business for industrial manufacturers. So she had gotten off the phone with 3 different clients that day, and all 3 were shutting down shop to a certain extent. So one of them had to close down completely because there was a spread of COVID within their facility. So they had nobody to actually run the machinery. Another one of her clients had to slow down on production because the demand had dropped completely due to COVID-19, right? Everybody's focus was on PPE. Another client, I believe, had to shut down because of regulations at that time in their specific location. So I was heading up design at that time, and I kind of put 2 and 2 together. I was like, hey, if all these manufacturers start shutting down in large numbers, we're going to end up with a platform of manufacturers that are not going to be available for industrial buyers. So that night, I reached out to the product strategy team, which is a team that consisted of the CEO, CTO, CMO, and the president of one of our subsidiaries. So I gave them the heads up. I told them what I came across. I actually ended up hopping on the phone with the CEO and the CTO at 8 or 7 o'clock that night. And this was on a Friday. They gave me the green light to brainstorm and come up with a way to address this. So I gathered what I called at the time my super friends at the organization, which was the head of engineering and the head of client services, as well as the CTO. We regrouped Saturday morning, and we brainstormed a set of ideas that would help us identify companies that were still open for business on the platform, as well as being able to provide parts, products, or parts, services, or materials related to PPE. So by Monday, we had a feature definition. We had some preliminary designs. Tuesday, we got the thumbs up from the product strategy team. And by, was it Friday of that same week, we went live with an MVP version of this COVID-19 response system. And like traffic and engagement went through the roof for the weeks following. And what was super cool is that Congress sent out an email. I think it was 2 weeks later, 2 or 3 weeks later, Congress sent out an email to the manufacturing caucus recommending our COVID-19 response system as one of the top resources for finding manufacturers of PPE in the United States. That was super cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's I'm getting like goosebumps just as I tell. It's like
that's pretty cool. I was getting goosebumps too when you said Congress.
Yeah, it's crazy. I started calling my whole family, and I was like, "Hey, look at what I did." Like half of my family, I'm from Colombia. Half of my family doesn't speak English, and I was trying to translate. I was like, "Hey, look at what I did," and they're like, "Wow, that's actually that was pretty amazing. Congrats." We started also receiving a ton of thank you letters and just like user feedback saying, wow, like you guys really helped us because of the badging system that we came up with. We were providing a level of validation for manufacturers that wouldn't necessarily create, let's say, N95 masks or surgical masks, which is a bit more of an easier type of mask to manufacture. And because of our badging, they were getting this level of credibility from buyers. So the folks were saying, thank you so much. It was, yeah, I feel like we probably did make a difference. And yeah, it was a pretty cool experience. Yeah.
That's very cool. And you built that in what, a week? 1 week?
Yeah. So I got the green light to brainstorm a set of solutions. So it was from Friday end of day and it wasn't the next Friday, it was the Monday after the next Friday. So it was about a week and a few days. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's
that is pretty cool. And that I like that story because I think it's, you talked about that you're going through this interview process now, and I'm pretty sure that story comes up in your interview process.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to transition over to that. We could get into the product stuff at another time. I think there's going to be probably a lot more opportunities for us to go into the product itself type of stuff. But for now, just talking through this interview process, and I'm not sure specifically which role you said. I know you said VP level or director level, but I'm not sure if it's design or product management. But why don't you could start from how you're thinking about your process right now based on your experience of you've interviewed a ton of folks, right, that you've hired into roles on your teams in the past, and how you're positioning yourself, your strategy, how you're thinking about it. How should folks that actually want to get into this type of role, you could talk what role you're looking for, how should they be thinking about stuff, based on your thought process, just to get them some insight?
It's so the I guess just to clarify on the role first, it was only in towards the end of 2020 that I got promoted, I got promoted, but my responsibilities were now extended to cover product for the entire organization. We've never really had a standardized approach to product, and a combination of what I was able to do with the COVID-19 response system and the experience optimization system, which we prioritized tests and worked with different individuals in the organization to collect ideas, collect feedback, and eventually launch features. The combination of these two efforts were the reason why leadership pretty much, like gambled on me spearheading product, and it worked out well. But I'm not interested in product, which is crazy. I love understanding problems and coming up with solutions. But let's face it, product takes a beating, man. I don't know how you all do it. It's like you're the face of the feature, you're the face of the product. And you're basically what's shielding the entire organization from the makers, right? From the designers, from the software engineers. So it takes a Superman. I kid you not. Yeah, or Superwoman. But it's yeah. So this is my long-winded way of saying that I want to stick with design because that is where my passion is. That is, it overlaps a decent amount into the product side of things. But design is my passion, and that's the type of role that I'm trying to get into, or I'm trying to continue with. So what I'm looking for right now is a director of product design. So I work directly with the product team, the software engineering team, to really figure out some of the toughest like solutions for problems in the respective industries. And it's there's a big, so I've never hired for somebody at a director level. I usually hired for individual contributors and at times managers.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a whole different ballgame when not only when you're hiring at a director level, but also when you're looking for the job yourself. Just really understanding the other side of the coin and empathizing with how users go, not users, but people go through these through this process. It's pretty enlightening.
Do you find that folks are asking the same type of questions over and over again? And what are some of those questions and how do you answer them?
Yeah. So I came across this pattern early on. So recruiters, which is usually the first person that you interact with at the company, they always ask the same set of questions. And that is the typical, tell me about yourself question. So learning about a really concise way to tell your story, that's probably the best thing that you could do as somebody that's interviewing. Conciseness is the key to that, man.
Yeah, no, that's very good. Because and I want to spend a few more seconds on this, because a lot of times folks come into interviews and they start rattling off about things that is not really positioning them, in the ideal way for the role that they're looking to do.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's so key that you're concise about what you're saying. You're telling your story, and that's important that you're telling your story, right? A lot of times too, folks get like, oh, I don't want to talk about myself too much. No, but this interview is about you, so you should be highlighting what you have done, right? And not what we did, or I was on this team and we did this cool thing. No, but what was your contribution to that, right?
Right.
So I think that's key that you said, being concise and learning to tell your story, because that's important.
Yeah. And also, I mean, to that point, the and I didn't realize this, right? I wasn't too I didn't make too much of an effort to double down on this, but the homework that you do on the specific company and the way that you're able to tie that back to your story, that is a huge, that's it's difficult to do, but it's like I'm running out of words. It's a big
It's important.
It's extremely important. It is. Yeah. And I remember I used to go into, like, I was so focused at first, like, oh, tell my story. And I had a few interviews with recruiters where I would go in and tell my story. And this is a good segue into the next question. And sometimes it's actually the first question, which is like, what do you know about our company? Right? And then that's when I used to get caught like a deer in the headlights. And
what company is this again?
What's your, oh man, yeah. So it's that's a consistent question that they ask, and really being able to demonstrate that you genuinely did your homework, not just because that's what they want to hear, but also because it helps you understand whether you're a good fit for this role or not. So being able to genuinely tell your story based off of what they're looking for, or based off of the type of company that they are, it's a good situation to be in. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's key. And that question is different. I mean, the answer is different depending on the role you're looking for as well. I'd assume that for a design role, you don't need to talk about the company from a business perspective or the industry, right? But you do need to whatever your story is, tie that together in a design from a design perspective, right? Like, you know,
Well,
yeah. How do you talk about that part? How do
so
you tie together? How do you tie together?
usually the business questions or the business related questions start showing up when you're interviewing with the hiring manager.
Mhm.
Uh, but the even from a during the recruiter's interview, if you are able to tie in your design efforts to direct business impact, uh,
Mhm.
that's a pretty like big deal.
Yeah.
It's something that they do look for.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, every single cent spent, regardless of who you are in the organization, it needs to be tied directly to the money that the company is going to make. Uh,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
that's and I feel like that is a mistake that I've seen more junior folks make throughout their career, especially in interviews,
Mhm.
where it just doesn't they don't really do a good job of tying business impact um, to their work. Um, so yeah, I mean, and something that you also learn with
Yeah.
as like you mature in your design career too.
So I want to pause on that point for a bit because I think that's very key. You said a lot of junior folks make this mistake where they don't tie um, what they're doing or their work to the company and the outcomes of the company, right? The desired outcomes of what the company is looking for.
Yeah.
I think that's a key point that, folks that are listening out there, if you're a junior person and you haven't grasped this concept yet, or you could even be a more senior person too that haven't grasped this concept, right? That's super important that you always, even not just in interviews, but even when you're trying to position yourself for promotions, right? Or you're trying to ask for more money or something, right? Whatever it is in the organization that you want something from the organization, you need to be positioning yourself as an asset to show, here's what I'm going to do and or what I have done, and here's how it's going to benefit or be beneficial to the company in the bottom line, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very key point you made.
Yeah, no, and it's and they have plenty of like anybody could spend like 5 to 10 minutes Googling like what's the perfect way to answer the recruiter questions. And there are some videos. It's a risky thing to do because there's so many videos that give horrible advice. And then
Sure.
what you end up getting is a wave of candidates that are responding questions in the exact same way. But it's
Yeah.
yeah,
So
let's scratch that from the record. Let's not do it. Yeah. But, so there's another question. So they ask you about yourself. They ask you about the company. Another big question is they ask you what are you looking for in your next role? And yeah, I mean the answer to this, they base like their entire opinion of you based off how you answer this question.
Mhm.
um, I don't know what the perfect way is. I genuinely answer the question. I want to look for a company. I want to join the company that cares about humans, not just because it's the right thing to do, but that's also good for business, and that gives me the support necessary to be able to care for my team and grow my team.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know what the right answer for that one is, but genuinely answer, what are you looking for in your next job?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, answer anything except I'm only looking to get paid.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, like
You
I
guys pay? Are you guys gonna pay me at least 200K a year? That's my goal.
and don't get me wrong, money's amazing, and you
Yeah.
should like have respect for your ability to do the work necessary and get paid for it.
Yeah.
But just figure out a bit of a better genuine narrative than that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, you're right. I haven't mastered that question as well. Whenever I get that question, which is like all the time, whenever I've ever done an interview, I kind of stutter on it. I'm like, it trips me up a bit because I'm like, okay, psychologically, I know that this is a trick question because they're really trying to learn about what your desire is, right? To see if you're a match for the role, right? That's ultimately what I think most recruiters are looking for, right? They're trying to see if you're a right fit for the role in terms of what you're looking for, right? And what the role is what they know the role is gonna offer. Um, but it's also a question where, like you were saying, they're going to judge, their opinion of you based on this question as well. A lot of it rides on this question. And I think folks kind of just go off the deep end and, start saying stuff that you don't have to say. Like, my opinion on how to answer that question is just to be very concise, like you were saying before. Very concise, like honestly, you know, in this next role, you're looking for X. Why are you applying for this job? Right. Yeah, we all know you want a paycheck. Everybody knows that. That's automatic, right? That doesn't even factor into that shouldn't factor into the conversation that you're having right now, to answer this question, right? So it's more about like, like you were saying, you're saying like good human beings, like stuff like that, right? Like, what I usually say in that is, I tell folks, look, I'm passionate about what I do. I want to be in a role where I am passionate about what I do. And I'm in front of the way that translates for me is I want to be in a role where I relate it to product stuff, right? So I'm always tying it back to what a product person is supposed to do.
Yeah.
So I want to be talking with customers. I want to be like doing analysis on different things to understand, that we've met our KPIs, or how could we improve or tweak things to make to have better outcomes. How could we work better with engineering? How could we, there's a bunch of things in product that you could talk about, right? So, and I'll just talk about all those cool things in product management that folks do that, you know, that I would quote unquote want to look for in my next role, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because on the recruiter side, well, in the recruiter interview, all you're trying to do is get the thumbs up to then interview with the hiring manager. So
Exactly.
that's when the interesting questions come up. That's
Yeah.
where you need to have synergy with this person, right? And that one's a bit more. I don't think there's a script for that. There isn't.
No, there isn't. There isn't.
It's similar to what you and I are doing right now. This is like us being asked questions and being able to answer them in the best way possible based off of our experience.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's yeah, that one tends to be a bit more difficult.
So from a designer perspective, right? How do you go about, I know you said it's a little bit more difficult, but what's your mindset going into a conversation like that? Or you could even and after you answer that question, you could turn the tables and say, as a hiring manager, what was your mindset when you were looking for people, to bring to your team?
Yeah. So are you talking about the mindset into going to the initial interview, or the next step into the hiring managers?
Yeah, with the hiring manager. So we've moved past the recruiter. Recruiter, they're gonna ask you standard questions. We know that, and as long as you answer those questions in the way that we were saying, that should be good enough. Obviously, there's more questions, right, that they could ask you, but moving into like a hiring manager, right?
Yeah.
What's your mindset going in to talk with one, being that you're in the interview process now with a few different companies, and also when you were hiring folks for your team, what was your mindset in terms of what you were looking for, right? So kind of two questions in one.
So when I was hiring for folks on my team, I'll answer that one first. I was looking for four things. I was looking for the first thing that I was looking for is if this person's organized or not. I've come across so many individuals throughout my career that the company has had to part ways with, mostly because they just were not organized individuals. They were extremely creative. They were holding everybody back. And as creative as an individual is, if they're holding an entire team back and missing deadlines, it just becomes a burden on everybody else, and it slows the entire team down. So the first thing off the bat that I look for is this person organized?
Organization. What are some of the key things you hear that makes you understand if someone is organized or not?
So I've gotten some interesting responses here. I think at one point, and so my fiance does hiring too, a decent amount. And somebody once, and I'll steal her answer. Somebody once, she asked, like, how do you stay organized? And they responded with, well, I organize all my colored pencils in like one corner, and I put my Post-its over here. And it was it was a cute answer. It was, but like, at the same time, you have a clear understanding now that that person does not have a framework to stay personally organized with the tasks that they need to do. So the answers that I look for in that question is like, talk to me about, frameworks that do keep you organized, right? One of the bigger frameworks is there's a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen. Anybody that mentions that book, that's a clear like green light into the next question. But yeah, understanding the types of frameworks that the individuals use to stay organized. Some people honestly are just naturally organized human beings, right? And I think that's a fair question. That's a fair answer to give as well. And usually these naturally born organized folks are dependent more on just manual lists, and that's fine. And I've come across extremely organized people that literally just write everything down on a notepad and then cross things off on a daily basis. So yeah, just an answer regarding frameworks. Next thing that I ask, or not necessarily ask, but the next thing that I look for is whether they are good problem solvers. And I know that seems like a generic quality, but at the end of the day, regardless of the role that you're hiring for, you need a person that's going to be presented with a problem, and they're going to try their best to solve that problem to the best, in the best contextually way possible. And like you just, by the type of work that they present, how they run you through their solutions, you understand whether this is a person that really has an ability to problem solve or not. So anybody that's a good problem solver, that's like top of the list on my end.
What's probably like one of the best answers you've gotten for that question?
So it's not really a specific answer, because sometimes I do, since these are 4 different attributes that I'm trying to get out of a candidate, I still have a list of questions that I run through that would eventually give me the answer to these 4 attributes.
Okay.
But it's usually in the way so whenever they're demonstrating their work, the more qualified candidates really focus on the problem that they were trying to solve. So just an emphasis on the problem, and then how they came up with the solution. That usually gives me a good idea of their problem solving abilities. The next is their ability to execute, and this is big in the UX and product design industry. Because it doesn't matter whether you're the best problem solver in the world, but if you can't execute within the given time frame that you need to execute, and to a level of like high detail, then you're not really doing the job that you're being hired to do. So at the end of the day, execution is one of the most important, if not the most important aspect of hiring. It's similar, honestly, it goes hand in hand with like being a forward in soccer. You can be the best strategic mind and run up and down the field and like just win every single ball. But if at the end of the day, if you can't score, then yeah, like that's a shame. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah.
Then the last thing, and I hire for this, but I do not fire for this because you could fire for somebody that's not organized, lack of problem solving abilities, and not being able to execute. But the last one is, and you can't fire for it, is how passionate that individual is for what they do. And that makes everything else so much easier, man. Because they bring ideas to the table. They like, you know, that they're going to stay consistent with their ability to problem solve, their ability to execute. The more you have passion for something, the less of a struggle it is to actually get these things done. Reason I say that I can't fire for that and that nobody should fire for that is because a big part of I can hire for it, but once that person is hired, a big part of my responsibility is to keep them as motivated and as passionate as possible for what they do. The entire onus is not on me because it's also on the individual. But yeah, I mean, I play a big role in making sure that that person stays passionate for what they do on a day-to-day basis. I can't just give them redundant tasks all the time for them to do. That anybody would lose interest immediately taking that approach. Yeah, that's those are the four things that I look for when hiring. It's I try to. It's when applying for a job, it's a totally different beast, though. It's so going into the interview with the product manager. Now this is very specific to the type of job that anybody would be applying to. Like, this is the where they need to know whether you are somebody that is highly knowledgeable in their area of expertise. And I'm a process and framework nerd. So everything that I do does have a framework to it. Also because I guess what you call a creative person, and creative people do have trouble in staying organized. But the reason that I'm able to do what I do is because I depend on frameworks to keep me on track with everything. Mm-hmm. So with these interviews, it's just doubling down on what my design methodology is, the way that I take a problem from beginning to end and solve what I need to solve, how I collaborate with peers, how I communicate to stakeholders, how I'm able to influence the entire organization, right?
Yeah.
So it's all very specific to the job at hand. It's it's a bit more difficult to prep for that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of those things you could prep for, right? Like some of the things you said, I think you could prep beforehand. And you don't know what questions you're going to get exactly, but you could at least prep the answers and, find the right place to tie them in, because I've been in interviews with folks where I could tell they prepped and I asked them a question and they answered one of their prepared answers. And it was just like, okay, so that was obviously prepared. It didn't really answer the question that I was asking, but it's so sometimes stuff like that kind of throws, interviewer or hiring manager for, you got to be careful how you prepare, but you should prepare.
It's interesting. You bring up a really good point about preparing for these hiring manager interviews. There is a company, and I'm not going to say their name because they're unless they want to sponsor the show later on, and who knows, maybe we'll be a big hit. I don't know. But there's a company that preps candidates for big tech jobs, right? So for FANG, or I guess what they're calling MANG companies now, Meta, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. And they they have a list of questions that these bigger companies ask about, and some of them are pretty common, right? Like what's a mistake that you made, and like how would you go about things differently, or let's see, what's a man, I forget, like it's a handful of them. But their whole value prop, their whole business model is, we'll help you get a job, and then we're going to collect part of your salary for like the first year, which may be a good thing. Honestly, once you make it into one of these big companies, your network just grows exponentially. It's crazy what happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What company is it? It's okay. Like we'll capitalize on that later on. But for the folks that are listening in, so that they could get some value out of the conversation, besides conceptual stuff. Well, if you don't mind sharing, what's the name of the company then? So we could put the link for the company that you said that could do like preparation for the interviews in the notes below the video, so folks could find it there. So that'll be, if you guys scroll down, you'll see that. All right, cool.
Pathrise, there you go. It's pathrise.com.
Pathrise, how do you spell that?
PATHRISE.com.
PATHRISE.com. It's also going to be in the notes. So okay, that's great. And folks could like get like prepped, right, for interview questions and stuff.
Yeah, it's I guess it's a mentorship type of a service where they won't charge you unless you land a job in a big tech company.
Oh, they won't charge you. Oh, that's even better, right? Because they won't charge you unless you get the job.
Right. Yeah, it's a super interesting business model.
Yeah.
But anybody that is early on in their career right now, like I do recommend try and get a job at one of these big tech companies. It is going to do so much for your career later on, especially on the networking side. That it is well worth it. But.
Absolutely. So what's something that you'd like to leave the audience with? It could be about the interview process and what you're going through right now and the lessons you've learned, or it could be something about something that we talked about earlier, that you learned throughout your career. So what's something you'd like to share with the folks?
I wish I would have been told early on in my career that for both product managers and designers, one of the most important skill sets for you to learn is the skill of negotiating. And this isn't trying to get a better price, or this isn't haggling. This is negotiating. This is coming to terms with coming to terms with an individual in regards to what you're designing or building. Coming to terms is not the right word.
Forming an alignment or an agreement.
Yeah. I'll probably have to start and answer that one again. But negotiating it's one of the most important skill sets that anybody in the product and product design world should be able to learn. Like what you're doing on a day-to-day basis is negotiating. You are coming up with a design, and now you have to present it to a group of individuals and sell them on why you came up with what you came up. And there is going to be pushback. There is going to be requests for different features, and it's at the end of the day, it's all negotiating. getting on the same page and yeah, agreeing on the same solution.
So you mean the company doesn't just take your ideas and just do whatever you say?
Yeah, it's you'd be surprised. Like some people think that, hey, this beautifully designed product, it was just a designer that put this together. No, there was a lot of back and forth. And there was a really strong designer behind that discussion that was able to sell every single one of the design decisions that they made.
Yeah.
And it's it's one of those things that just nobody really talks about much, but really makes or breaks a design on a day-to-day basis. I am negotiating with software engineers. I am negotiating with product managers, and coming to an agreed upon solution that we're all content with.
Absolutely.
That's the role of a designer. Designers are brokers. Designers facilitate what they need to facilitate in order to come to these beautiful designs. So yeah, learn to negotiate. That'll pay off well. It also pays off in the salary side too later on. So yeah,
absolutely. I 100% agree with that. When I talk with designers, I'm always asking a bunch of questions. And a lot of times I'll always ask them, one of the questions I always ask a designer is, what was your thought process behind this design, and why did you take the approach that you took, right? And I'm looking for a deeper understanding of the user and the process that the user, what would be delightful to the user. But if a designer is not able to articulate that, then I'm not buying into, what they're saying, right? So it's, and that will lead to even more questions, right? But you're right. Like if they're able to, if a designer is able to articulate, that whole thought process and stuff, then it's like, wow, you want to agree with a person, actually, because ultimately you guys want the same thing,
right? Yeah,
hopefully.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not the case.
That is very true. Yeah. And it's really, so we just covered the recruiter part of the interview. We somewhat covered the hiring manager part of the interview, and we're probably not going to have time for this today. But a really interesting part of the interview is what happens after that, which is, at least in my case right now, and for most designers as well, is a presentation of their work. And
let's just go to it. Why don't we spend like 5 minutes there?
Yeah.
What happens after you go through the process, and it from a design perspective, design interview process, right?
So the goal with the hiring manager's interview is for you to be able to move on to the next step, because you've aligned in your philosophy to regarding whichever role it is that you're applying for, right? So if the hiring manager thinks that you both are on the same page, and he appreciates the quality of your work and your ability to problem solve, then what typically happens from a designer's perspective is that you move on to the stage in the interview process where you present to a group of people of that company. It's usually the design team, but sometimes there are individuals that join from different teams. And something to take into consideration here as a designer is you want to be able to join a company where there is a healthy level of cross department collaboration taking place. So if you go into these interview process, into this interview process, and it is only the design team, that is a good indicator that design is very siloed within that organization at times, right? I can't say that this would always be the case, but organizations that aren't able to bring in folks from engineering, folks from data, folks from product into this presentation, that's a sign that there's a healthy level of collaboration and cross department collaboration, cross team collaboration taking place. That's a company you want to work for.
Yeah.
So yeah, this one. So designers are, in my experience, introverts, and we hate presenting. And this doesn't come naturally to us. We're amazing visual storytellers, right? From UX to product to even graphic design, we're amazing visual storytellers. When it comes to our verbal acuity, we're not naturally good at that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it's figuring out how what's the project that you're going to present that is most in line with the company that you're applying to, and just practice telling your story, practice prepping that presentation, focus on the problem that you're trying to solve, how you solved it, and who were the folks from the organization that collaborated with you on that project. Because a lot of times, at least in my experience in interviewing folks, you don't really you interview some designers that don't really emphasize on what their role was. It's like, hey, we built this whole thing, but my role was just designing this little button over here. It's like, oh, but so really emphasizing on what your role is or was during that project.
Yeah.
And at the end is just telling a good story, that matches your visual story. It's difficult, man. It is. It's one of the most difficult parts of the interviewing process.
You spot on, and it was one of the points you said that I was talking about earlier as well, is talk about what you brought to the table, right? Like, like you were saying, like, what the person designed this one little button over here. And the other point you made too, around, just it's storytelling. It's a difficult thing, but as it's so important, and not just in design, it's important in almost
everything
role, any role that you could think of, right? So that's super. But as a designer, you're right. A lot of folks that I work with from a design perspective are introverted, at least from my perspective. There are some folks that were like more louder and extroverted, but those folks weren't actual designers. More like, I want to say they're still designers, but they didn't do any of the graphical stuff. They were more like experienced people. But you've got to tell a story. You got to get buy-in. You got to tell a story. Super critical, super important. So 100% agreed. And if folks that are watching and listening in, that's something to take away and to keep practicing, right, is your ability to tell a story.
It's interesting too that I didn't mention previously. You're doing all this work on really learning about the company and coming up with these questions. But what I've realized is that both interviewing and being interviewed, the interview goes so much better when the company also does their homework on the candidate. So for example, I mean, in my current interview right now, I'm supposed to be presenting to a company next week. So I've made it to the third round, and I'm not going to say the name yet, just so I don't jinx myself. But I'm presenting to a cross-functional group next week from the company, and the interview with the hiring manager. He was like, we had synergy, and in the beginning of the interview, he was telling me about some of the stuff that I had written on my site. And he was bringing up like really like obscure parts that you would have really needed to have gotten deep into an article to bring up. And that gave me so much confidence for the remainder of that interview that I don't think it would have worked out the same way otherwise. He really set me up for success in that entire interview, and that it helped me tell my story more eloquently, more confidently, simply because he did his homework. He did his homework, and it seemed like he really cared about interviewing me.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good sign. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, yeah, go for it. I think I was done. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's a great sign, because that usually tells you how the relationship is going to go as well. Because if he's invested in you, in the point where he's done his homework, he's taken time to look through your website and jot down notes or questions that he would like to ask you, and then he brings that up on the interview and sets you up for success, it's gonna be the same way when you guys are actually working together. And I appreciate that so much that you shared that, because in the interview process, like I remember when I do interviews, now I'm crazy research guy when I interview with a company. So I never go into an interview unprepared. Never. I always know about the company that I'm interviewing with, sometimes even better than the people I'm interviewing with, surprisingly, right? And that just comes from my startup mentality of, my career in tech started out in startup, and I ran that for 5 years. I interviewed a bunch of people, right, in my startup. And so many people, even though it was a startup, we didn't really have a big brand, like, let's say, like a Facebook, or Facebook is really big, right? But like another brand or any known brand, it was an unknown company. But damn, man, you come to my interview about my company, you have no idea, what we do. There's a website, right? Like, and that would just immediately, I'd want to end the interview, right? And also, folks would come in and not even know who they're talking to, right? And that would be another thing that's just like, okay, you couldn't just go to LinkedIn and look up who the person is that you're going to be talking with. My name was in the email, right? It's pretty easy to do that. And so those are things that when I interview, I always know who I'm interviewing with. If they gave me the name, I'm going to find out the person. I'm going to look them up on LinkedIn. I'm looking them up on Facebook. I'm looking them up, whatever, Instagram, whatever I could find information. I'm finding that person, and I'm finding out about that person, who that person is, what do they like in their free time. Everything about that person I know. Everything about the company that I could find online. I'm not going to learn everything about the company, but it helps to, like, if the company's in a space that I'm familiar with, like I'm extremely familiar with B2B payments and anything SaaS and stuff like that, right? So whenever I interview with a company like that, it's super easy because I just know those industries, and I'm able to automatically translate where this company is. And, from a business standpoint, I'm thinking about where this company is in comparison to their competitors and all of that stuff. And so I go into the interview with all of that ammunition, and I did all of that work. It's very disappointing if I come into the interview and the interviewer comes in and it's like, okay, what's your name again?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm just like, hey, all right, well,
it shows that they don't
your name.
Yeah, and I've heard about people interviewing on purpose and not hiring managers and not really looking at a resume up until the actual interview.
Yeah.
I'm like, how is that a good strategy? That's horrible. Like, that just makes you seem like a self-absorbed company that really doesn't care much about their employees. That's not the type of company that I would want to work for, at least.
Absolutely not.
So yeah,
Yeah. And so I guess the point there being, in the interview process is a two-way street, right? Um, the company you're interviewing with should do their homework on you, especially if it's a hiring manager that you're speaking with. Recruiters, yeah, whatever. They're talking to a bunch of different people. It's understandable, but they should know who you are anyway. The
right. Yeah.
hiring manager should definitely know something about you. Yeah, sure, they're busy, but they should have taken some time to, do some homework, right?
Yep. Yep. And it sounds a lot and does. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. On that note, Julian, I'm gonna call this first show
Yeah.
wrap. I think this was a great show, a
Thanks,
great
man.
first show.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, man. We have good chemistry. Yeah. This is
Yeah, absolutely.
time
Absolutely.
went by flying too. It's been 2 hours. It's crazy.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. It's
Yeah.
8.
It's 8 o'clock. Holy shit.
Man.
Well,
Wow. Yeah, yeah. And you still got to interview me, man. We didn't even get to that. So I guess we
oh
can.
man, I would. Yeah, let's do it. So this one's really focused on the design side, and there is a ton of questions that I have on the product management side. I think that'll be a really, really good like part two.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's do it, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, man. Hey, anything interesting that you're reading right now?
Yeah, actually, I actually don't read so much anymore. I listen to audiobooks now.
Yeah, yeah, audiobooks.
So I am listening to How Google Works. That's what I'm listening to right now. Have you ever heard about that book? It's written by Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt. He was for a period of time CEO of Google.
Okay.
And where did he come from? Was he a chief product person? No, I don't think he was. I think he was straight just CEO. He was a CEO for a period of time. He helped the company grow a ton. Obviously, you know how big Google is. He stepped away now, and obviously, guy doesn't have to work for the rest of his life. But yeah, so he wrote this book about the culture of Google and why they are how they are, and stuff like that. And it's a pretty interesting book. I didn't think that I would be so interested in it because I kind of know a lot about Google, but it's still pretty interesting.
I'm looking through my Audible list. I could have sworn I had something on Google here queued up for me to listen to.
Yeah, it says it's called How Google Works.
Yeah, I guess I don't. Wow. Okay. But yeah, I'll add that to my reading list. I think right now I am oh, I mean, I just got this book in. It's still actually in its like plastic wrapper and everything. But it's called Building a Second Brain. And I've been hearing a lot of people talk about this recently in my LinkedIn feed. And I'm big into just organization frameworks. Again, just coming from the creative side, I'm not naturally organized, but I love these frameworks that keep me, allow me to have these like moments of tranquility where I could just focus on my creativity, knowing that everything else is in place. I think that's where my best creativity comes from. But this building a second brain is supposed to be a next level for all of these organization frameworks, and I'm super curious to dive into it and see if there's anything that I could learn from this. But hopefully there is. So yeah,
Awesome.